Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Carla, and thanks everyone for joining. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Vertica reunion. And this is an opportunity for Vertica community to get together virtually, get up to speed on the latest Vertica announcements and innovations available now and in the near future. I'm Jeff Healy. I lead marketing for Vertica. I'll be your host for this event with Carla. But before we begin, I want to encourage everyone to submit questions during the virtual session. You don't have to wait. Just enter your questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. Anything we don't address, we always promise to try to do that offline. And as Carla mentioned, this webcast is being recorded, be available to view on demand this week, and we'll send you a notification as soon as it's ready. So why don't we get started? Okay, so again, my name is Jeff Healy. I'm really excited to be here with my Vertica classmates. If you didn't know, you've joined the Vertica reunion here, and you're now part of a class of 2022. We won't share what classes we were graduating from in these high school photos or early photos, but here are some of my esteemed colleagues. We've got David Sprogis, who's the Director of Product Management, and we've got Steve Sarsfield, who's Director of Product Marketing, and we've got Amy Miller, who probably doesn't need any introduction. If you're a Vertica customer, chances are you've worked very closely with Amy, who's our VP of Customer Success and has a team located around the world, working very close with the customers, make sure that they're deriving the most value from Vertica. But why don't we go to the next slide, Carla? And what I want to hit on here is that, we've seen the registration list. We've got customers that are using our current version right now. We're always coming out with releases. Dave is going to dig in there, kind of bring everyone up to speed. But it's amazing. Every time we have these events or otherwise meetups or user conference meetings, we'll hear a lot of things. Oh yeah, no, I remember Vertica, right? That's the Stonebreaker company. Or yeah, Projections was a really great innovation. And I hear a lot of big companies using storing lots and lots of data, petabytes of data. And whatever happened to that big data conference? You're a columnar architecture, right? That's all true, all of that. We hear these things. These are kind of the keyword phrases. If you were to associate and create a tag cloud with Vertica, that obviously would come, but it's a lot more. And that's the whole point of this meeting here. We want to bring everyone up to speed, whether you use CE back in the day, Community Edition on version 5, and maybe you went a different route, right? And you're coming back and you're saying, man, I really love that product. And I'd like to understand all the innovations that have happened over time. And there are a ton, way more than we could possibly cover in this event. But Dave's going to do an admirable job, I know, of kind of looking at those really breakthrough innovations. Many of them are here. So talk about in-database machine learning. We were the first to get there. We've seen great adoption, a very innovative approach, made a big investment there. We want to make sure that any of the Vertica users out there, again, past and present, take advantage of that innovative approach. Dave's going to dive into Eon Mode, a separation from storage architecture option, which is becoming kind of the default option for those variable workloads and running those in Vertica. I won't go through all these, but I think you'll get an idea where you thought Vertica was that Stonebreaker company with the columnar architecture, using innovative technologies like projections. It is that, absolutely, but it's a whole lot more. That's the whole idea around this event, one of many, where we're going to spotlight some of those areas, the innovations, so that you get an idea of the really robust platform that we have for you. But before I hand it off to Dave, just 2 quick slides. The next one is talking about the investment that we continue to make, not only in the technology, but also in the resources that are available. The Vertica Academy is our e-learning platform. Massive amount of content available there. Self-paced learning, online training. We actually have live classes as well. We have thousands and thousands of users that sign up for the Vertica Academy or trainers behind it, making sure that you have all the information you need to build that knowledge. This came about maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, where many of our customers are saying, look, I can't possibly get enough Vertica talent, right? And we know it's a super competitive space. And we thought we really need to build out an e-learning platform so that we can train the next great Vertica solution architects, DBAs, even data scientists that take advantage of the database machine learning approach. And it's been hugely successful. Best part about it, it's all free. So go check out the Vertica Academy. You can get certification and even more. So one of those great resources that wanted to plug. And finally, on the next slide, before I pass it off to Dave, is I mentioned in that tag cloud, the big data conference. Maybe one of the first big data conference nearly 10 years ago, and you were there to see Billy Bean, right? And we had really, really great events. Well, through COVID and things like that, and things going more virtual, we're really, really excited to share that we're coming back live in person in Boston and in Paris. We're going to go virtual in APJ, just a massive area that we didn't think we'd do it a great service to just pick one city. And if you can't make it, or you're not willing, you're not comfortable, you can't do it, you can also tune in virtually. But the best way that you're going to get that great experience is to join us in Boston and join us in Paris, or tune in. So we've also removed, not just virtually, as far as the admission, it's free. We understand it's been tough a couple of years, right? So we want to remove any barrier, any obstacle to meet you in person if you're comfortable to do so. We're going to have some incredible presentations there, like we always do. It's always about the content. It's always about the speakers. It's the engineers that architect this great platform. It's the customers that rely on that platform, some pretty amazing analytical initiatives. And we're lining them up now. You're not going to want to miss it. Definitely everyone who's here right now, please, after this webcast, sign up, and promise you won't regret it. Okay, so that's just a little bit there. We're excited about a great event here. Hopefully you guys have lots of questions. We'll keep the discussion going, not only here, but beyond. Got a special announcement at the end that Amy Miller is going to share. Promise not to steal her thunder. So I'm going to pass it over to Dave Spro just now. Dave, why don't you take it away from here?
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you are. As Jeff mentioned, I'm Dave Sprogis, Director of Product Management at Vertica. And as you can see from my video, I don't look anything like my high school picture there. Whoops, can we go back one? Thank you. So I am going to take you through some of the big innovations over the last 3 to 4 years. I thought I'd walk through the highlights and thread Eon Mode, the ideal platform for ML at scale in cloud, on-prem, and hybrid. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before we get started, there are a couple of roadmap items on the slides, so it's important to take a minute to understand that these few items, particularly workload routing, are forward-looking statements, subject to change, and not a commitment to deliver. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Where to start and how to thread it all together. All right, I'm going to use the vine metaphor to describe our innovations and how they all connect to one another. I'll start in the middle with Eon Mode, our architecture of separating compute from storage. From there, I'll go up and to the left where we brought Eon Mode on-prem. This opened the door to hybrid deployments just below. And from there, we're going to jump to the upper right side with subclusters, which enable workload isolation. Workload isolation protects SLAs, and this is especially important when training and running ML models against the same database as dashboards and other lightweight queries can be affected by heavy workloads. Along the bottom, I'll cover support for Kubernetes on the left and workload routing on the right. And I will end with Accelerator, which is a great segue to the following speaker, Rohit Amarnath. Next slide, please. Eon Mode was originally imagined for the cloud and AWS in particular. The enterprise mode architecture on the left was cumbersome to scale because scaling involved file surgery and data movement. All of this took time, 12, 24, 36 hours, depending on your database and cluster. This would not work in the cloud where users expect to scale within minutes. Thus, Eon Mode in the middle was born. Rather than storing the master copy of the database across locally attached storage on the left, Eon Mode in the middle outsources the master copy of the database to communal storage, S3, HDFS, or Azure Blob. To ensure that performance does not suffer, we add a local caching layer represented by the gray disks in the middle, in between the communal storage and the compute nodes. This architecture has 4 benefits, which are listed on the right. You can scale up and down quickly to meet your demanding workloads, and of course, to save money during idle periods. You can also isolate workloads to protect SLAs, and node recovery and other cluster operations become much faster. Also, you can hibernate your database when not in use and then revive it when you need it again. Again, saving the cost of keeping the database running. Next slide. Eon Mode was barely GA when one of our first customers deployed it on premise. What? Several of us nearly fell out of our seats when we learned of this at a conference because it was public information I can share that it was AT&T, and they figured that if we were communicating with an S3 bucket and if Pure Storage exposed an S3 bucket, then hey, why not give it a try? And thus, the first deployment on-prem was Eon Mode running on Pure Storage FlashBlade, and it worked. Sure, there were a few bumps, and we quickly learned that customers were interested in the Eon Mode architecture on-premise for many of the same reasons that they were interested in Eon Mode for the cloud. One after another, customers began asking for us to support additional object storage solutions. They're listed there on the right, excuse me, and we keep adding more. Next slide, please. Operating in the cloud and on-premise open the door to hybrid deployments. Typically, hybrid deployments have a production deployment on-premise with non-production deployments in the cloud as needed, seasonal overflow in the cloud as needed, perhaps a DR solution in the cloud, hopefully never needed, and even ML training in the cloud as needed. That's okay. You can stay on the next slide. Thanks. Subclusters became the next most important development for Eon Mode, enabling workload isolation, repeated at the top of this slide. Subclusters all read from the same database, which means that they're all looking at the same freshly loaded data. However, execution of queries is limited to the peer nodes within the same subcluster. This means, for example, that analytic and machine learning workloads in one subcluster will not affect dashboard queries running in another subcluster. This is how DBAs can protect the SLAs of various workloads. Subclusters can be created and dropped as needed. Subclusters can be sized to their workloads. Some workloads might need more nodes, and some might need fewer. Some workloads might need beefier machines. And yes, you can mix hardware, not in the same subcluster, but in different subclusters. Different subclusters can each have different types of hardware. And if you need higher concurrency on a workload, you can dedicate multiple subclusters to the same workload by load balancing across them. Subclusters are often a great replacement for replication. Subclusters offer a route to near zero downtime upgrades. I know that's a mouthful. And subclusters are particularly well suited to support machine learning workloads, which are often long-running workloads, which takes us to the next slide. You probably recall that Vertica has been capable of machine learning for some time. Machine learning leverages our user-defined functions in the middle of this slide, which can be coded in C, Java, Python, or R. Along the same line, you will see Vertica Py, which is our Python library, which makes model development very easy in Python. All of this runs directly on the database, which makes Vertica the ideal machine learning platform at scale. In blue, you can see a few of our built-in models as well as integrations. To the left, you can see additional integrations. I will call out PMML, which is the third line, as an important means of importing and exporting models, and export on the right side of the slide. Next slide, please. I mentioned our Kubernetes integration earlier. Our image is available on Docker Hub. Our Kubernetes operator is now capable of, going down the left-hand column, of performing near zero downtime upgrades, improved logging, hybrid cluster, operator installs, upgrades, scale, revive, and node recovery. We support EKS, GKS, and OpenShift with Helm chart support, and all of the Eon Mode object stores mentioned earlier. Moving to the middle, we're planning to enhance auto scaling, improve security. This bullet will probably always be there because you're never done, right? Support AKS and private cloud orchestration, HP Esmeralda and SUSE Rancher, and test environments for UDX containers. Looking beyond and to the right, we intend to enhance backup and restore with automation, integrate with Prometheus and other monitoring tools, and support Tanzu and Portworx storage. Next slide, please. Looking even more forward, and this is roadmappy, orchestrating your cluster and subclusters is great, but there's something missing. Every time you spin up additional nodes, they often come with new IP addresses. And sure, there are solutions such as Elastic IP, and you can play games with DNS. But the easiest thing to do would be to manage your workloads through routing and routing tables inside of Vertica. Imagine connecting to any node, but knowing that your workload will be processed in the correct subcluster. Imagine routing workloads by username or by workload tag. And you can have as many tags as you like. Imagine even more. Taken to extreme, we could route your workloads based on cost, which might be determined by our optimizer. Or maybe one of the subclusters is a better fit for the workload because it has already cached all of the necessary files to support the queries. And maybe this is a route to serverless. We don't know, but perhaps the workload could trigger the creation of a new subcluster, right-sized to the workload. We think that workload routing has a lot of potential. Next slide, please. And I'm going to end, And I'm going to end with a few words about Accelerator, our SaaS offering. A few words because I don't want to steal Rohit's thunder. He will discuss Accelerator in some detail. In a nutshell, however, Accelerator is made possible by Eon Mode. You create and manage your deployments through a SaaS interface at Vertica. Your deployment goes into its own AWS account. This gives you full control over your deployment. You can negotiate discounts directly with AWS. We do not mark up the hardware, and we do not charge any egress fees. Your data is in your cloud. Rohit will pick up from here and tell you more about Accelerator. Rohit?
Sorry, I'm not Rohit. My name is Steve Sarsfield. I'm Director of Product Marketing for that. I was wondering where Rohit was. I thought I was filling in for him, Dave. It's true, but so here I am.
You're tagging in, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
I think this is great. So thank you for that lead in, a great presentation about the roadmap. I learned something from the roadmap as well. So I want to talk about the future of data analytics as a service with Vertica Accelerator. Really just talking about a new product offering that we have around a SaaS offering essentially for Vertica. I think One thing that you might want to think about is when you're thinking about whether you want SaaS or on-premise or in the cloud is sort of the analytics journey that people take when they are doing new initiatives and implementing new databases. So for me, it's about, analytics monetization, right? I want to be able to handle growth, expand data, make sure I can do machine learning and predictive analytics, and update my data lakehouse, data warehouse strategies around that. There's hybrid cloud, which a lot of people are adopting now. So I think that's the next thing. A lot of people have moved to cloud, but now there's this whole movement around, well, I want to be able to run everything that I can run in the cloud, also on premise when I need to. And it's great for things like disaster recovery. So this journey might be part of what you're looking at, what you're thinking about. Data democratization is a big one. It always has been. People want more access to more analytics within the organization. And then finally, data fabric, not exactly in our warehouse, but what this really means is I want to be able to go out and get external tables and get external data, right? And make sure that that's part of our analytics. So all of this super important as we think about, the journey. So we are announcing Vertica Accelerator. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, no, sorry. There we go. Okay. So the analytical teams that you have in your corporation vary because corporations vary, right? So traditionally, we have sold a lot to high-tech corporations with massive teams of developers, and they like access to all the knobs, and they're into optimizing. And Amy will tell you that they're always pushing the limits of Vertica. And then there are customers that we sell to who are embedded analytic developers, and they like it, for optimal mode types for the type of workload that they have. They want advanced and maybe highly specialized analytics, and most of all, they want low cost. We think about sort of lean, agile teams. So these tend to be smaller companies or companies with smaller IT departments. And they want to deploy on their own terms, whether it's in cloud or not. And they want some control and certainly control of the workloads. And then finally, there's the people that are sort of like analysts and citizens, data scientists. And they prefer cloud, they prefer immediacy, they prefer standards. And so this is really what the new offering for Vertica Accelerator offers. It's just a way to kind of handle all of these different types of companies that we might encounter in the market. Next. So we're announcing Vertica as a service. This is Vertica, 100% Vertica running in Eon mode, but all fully managed on AWS. And when we run this unified service or this Vertica as a service, we're running in your AWS account. And that's super, super important. So you get all the capabilities around data warehouse, all the capabilities around the query engine or the data lake. And then you also get, no cutback on the analytical features for both SQL and Python and machine learning and all of those analytical features. Next. So, we do have cloud native capabilities in the software itself. This version of the software as a service uses the separation of compute and storage, as David mentioned. It has the capability to isolate and auto-scale analytical workloads, and we'll see a little bit of that in the demo that I'm about to present. It takes just a few minutes, under 10 minutes, to provision and manage and monitor Vertica Accelerator. And then when you can also set it up so that when your database is not in use and it's idle and no queries are coming in, it'll automatically shut itself down. So some great cloud native capabilities built into Vertica Accelerator. We do have great security and transparency. So we're keeping all the data and computing resources in your own secure cloud. We're not taking in that data and moving it to our cloud. And because of this, you can negotiate and leverage your own contracted spend with AWS. So, a lot of companies tend to buy a lot of compute, a lot of time with AWS, and they negotiate that contract. And you can use our compute nodes in Vertica against that negotiated contract. And that helps you also minimize data movement in and out of your environment. Next. So how does it work? Certainly, Vertica Accelerator, you would go to our website, Vertica Accelerator website runs in Vertica's Amazon cloud. So we would create a cross-account identity and access management link. It would be established during onboarding from our cloud to the Amazon cloud. The management plane servers then directly connect and set up and manage databases created in your AWS account. And again, there's no data movement outside. AWS servers are set up and the storage environment is set up. So we'll slide up some S3 buckets for Eon Mode, and direct payments for that is all sent to AWS. Next. So let's take a look now. This is probably the most exciting part of my presentation, I think, just to look at how it works.
Vertica Accelerator delivers blazing fast analytics as a managed service with a simplified experience for all. Setting up an account is quick, simple, and secure, with the possibility of enabling single sign-on in the future. After signing up, you'll cross-link Vertica Accelerator with your AWS account. Our Bring Your Own Cloud model allows you to keep data and compute resources on your own secure cloud while leveraging your AWS pricing contract. Upon login, you'll be greeted by the home page. Here, you can easily gauge your database's status and health at a glance, as well as view details on a more granular level. When it comes to creating a database, we've streamlined the process to maximize ease of use by offering popular, affordable, and highly performant choices. With simple cluster sizing and the option to scale up or down later, creating a database is quicker and easier than ever. While deploying your database relies on Amazon provisioning hardware, typically databases fully deploy in under 10 minutes. It's that fast. Adding subclusters is just as easy as creating a database. You can have heterogeneous subclusters within one database, each with different sizes and instance types. Since Vertica Accelerator is running on Eon Mode architecture, you can easily change your subcluster size and instance types with just a few clicks. Next, you'll follow a few quick steps to connect to third-party tools and your preferred programming language using the pre-filled connection string. DNS names are assigned to all your subclusters, so you can easily connect to them without having to memorize node IP addresses. Now that your database is up and running, monitor the health of your entire system on a single dashboard. View the most relevant and important information about your system to get an indication of how well your databases are doing. There's also a similar dashboard where you can monitor usage consumption. This page shows a usage summary with session logs for each database, helping you to monitor runtimes as well as manage costs. We know that our customers are busy people, so we're introducing autoscaling, a time-based scheduling feature that allows you to automate scaling on both one-time and recurring schedules. Alternatively, if you have unpredictable or volatile workloads, use elastic autoscaling. Just set a threshold at which to start additional secondary subclusters at, and you're all set. In this instance, when the number of running sessions on the database exceeds 56, for 15 minutes or more, an additional secondary subcluster will start. More secondary subclusters will be started or stopped on the same basis. This, in conjunction with the flexibility of heterogeneous subclusters of different sizes and instance types, offers full control over the balance between performance and cost effortlessly. When you enable the idle shutdown feature, your database will automatically stop when there are no active queries running, saving you time and valuable resources. With that, we've covered the steps to get started with Vertica Accelerator, as well as features to optimize for performance and cost, all with just a few clicks. Now you can have your analytics running on a Vertica database in no time.
So just to wrap up here, so we think the future of data analytics as a service is Vertica Accelerator. This is where you own your own data. There's no markup on cloud infrastructure. There is a single tenant control plane, and you really get all the functionality that you have in Vertica that you get in Vertica Accelerator, including machine learning advanced analytics, access to external tables, and all the capabilities that you have in Vertica. All right, and that's it. And I'll hand it over to Amy.
Thank you, Steve. Well, we're very happy to announce our starting up of a regional Vertica users group. Our plan is to really start off as really simple virtual group and then branch out into regions around the world. So as we grow, you see our goal is to connect Vertica users with each other, share use cases, stories, challenges, and successes. So we have a sign up page, so register now. As you can see, the link is here, and we're going to share that link with you as well. Carla, I'm pretty sure we're going to share all these slides as well, right? As Vertica users, you're going to drive the content and you're going to tell us what you'd like to discuss. So when you sign up, there'll be an area there to enter in your topics that you want to discuss. And we'll provide some experts to help cover these topics and start the group discussion. But we want this to be for you and kind of led by you. And so we're also looking for some leaders or interested in leaders that want to help run the user group and help communicate with us as primary, contacts so that we can help you drive or provide experts in areas that you're interested in. So this is our new announcement, and we're very excited to kind of kick this off again. I know there are some user groups around the world already, but we're kind of primarily want to get more engaged with you and help you drive this, as well as help spread the word and share success with you. So that's our goal. And I think that wraps it up. And I'd like to thank David and Jeff, Carla, and Steve for pulling this all together. We do apologize for Ro. He had a family emergency he had to take care of. Steve filled in for him. It was going to be a joint discussion. Ended up just being Steve. But thank you very much. Would love to have some questions. And, I see a couple coming in now. So I don't know, Jeff, do you want to take over and lead the Q&A?
Sure. Yep, absolutely. So thanks everyone for joining, as Amy mentioned, and please keep those questions coming. We've got plenty of time for Q&A, and it looks like we've been able to address quite a few of them, which is good. Okay, so Dave, maybe you want to summarize a little bit about some of the questions that came in, just so in case anyone's missed them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Accelerator.
Absolutely, Jeff. Yeah, so one of the questions was, what's the benefit of bringing your own cloud? And of course, the benefits are go directly to pricing and charging, right? So to the extent that you can negotiate a better deal for your instances and storage costs with AWS, and in the future with other clouds, then more power to you. The other thing too is Vertica does not control the underlying storage. That's in your hands, and so we do not add an egress fee for you to pull your data out of Vertica. So by having everything in your cloud account, it gives you full transparency and understanding, particularly on a cost basis. Another question which came up was blending Accelerator for an in-cloud, perhaps AWS deployment, and an on-prem with a single management pane. And the answer is no, we can't do that today, but that is imagined for the future. Right now, Accelerator is only available on AWS. Our plans are to go to other cloud platforms initially, but at some point we do intend to offer an on-prem management solution as well. And when we do, then yes, you would have one control panel across your multiple deployments wherever they're located. There was another question. Let me look back a little bit. Auto scaling. Yes, we do provide auto scaling today. Auto scaling means different things to different people, and there are many different ways you can approach it. Right now, auto scaling means that we add additional subclusters to meet your growing workload, and then we load balance across them, as I had mentioned in the presentation, and then you can take them back down again. You may want different kinds of auto scaling. You may want a single cluster which scales out, and that's coming. You may want other things as well. You may want to trigger it in different ways. You may want to trigger it based on workloads versus based on time. We expect to have a very mature ability to auto scale in different ways in the future. Did I miss anything?
David, so Bradley asked me, is there any holdback on the features when it comes to Vertica Accelerator versus Vertica in Eon mode? And I thought it's important to kind of point that out, that there really are no holdbacks. I guess maybe the only thing is that we don't install in traditional enterprise mode when you're using Vertica Accelerator. Other than that, all the analytical features are there, right? And machine learning is there. Everything that you need is there. Correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. There is one thing worth pointing out, though, and that is you really only want one control plane. So you would not want to put management console on top of your deployment in addition to having accelerator as your control plane, because then they could get out of sync with one another.
Dave, you had a question. We were talking prior to the meeting that you get quite often around subclusters, limits and things like that. Do you want to address that? It's always a popular topic.
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that one more time, Jeff?
Oh, sure, Dave. I said before the meeting we were talking about some anticipated questions, and one was around subclusters. How many can you have?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a great question. So I think that we do have a limit around 1,000, and that's arbitrary. We don't expect anyone to ever have that many. The largest deployment of Vertica in Eon mode today it's public, so I can share it. It's with the trade desk. They're managing a 12 petabyte database using 640 nodes, configured as 128 nodes dedicated to ETL. And then the remaining nodes are configured in subclusters of 64 in order to perform their various analytic queries, most of which are operating at milliseconds across that. They have a total of what I think 5 subclusters, and they're intending to grow it to 6, which is going to push that 640 up over 700. But I don't expect anyone to test the limits of 1,000 subclusters.
And Dave, there's also in database machine learning for any of the kind of longtime Vertica customers that may be relatively new to Vertica, say in the last couple of years. You covered in database machine learning, but can you talk a little bit about developing models outside of Vertica and how we can support that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the primary platform is, of course, Python, and for Python, we've created a library which makes connecting to the database and managing the data objects, the data frames, a lot easier, and that's called Vertica Py. It's available on GitHub. If you go to our GitHub repo, you should find it very quickly. I believe it's github.com/Vertica, and just browse through our repo. You'll find it probably on the first page because it's very popular. Whether you build your models inside Vertica directly by hooking up Jupyter notebooks to Vertica, or you develop them somewhere else, you can import them using PMML, and of course you can export them on the back end as well. Our future plans with regard to machine learning include ML ops. So to the extent that you're creating and managing models in Vertica, particularly in a highly regulated market, you're going to care very much about every recommendation or every prediction or everything that comes out that you share publicly. And so to support that, we're planning to help you manage those models and help you be able to, give you the constructs you need to be able to respond to regulatory inquiry. And you can imagine where you might have to go recreate the output of a model that might have happened 2 or 3 years ago. And so if you're building all of that, you care about versioning, you care about these things, and we're going to help you manage that.
Very good. Thanks, Dave. And it looks like we got a question from Anton related to subclusters. Can you clarify what you mean about dev/QA subclusters? It's about some DevOps practice.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question. If you have a particular application that you want to be able to develop against your primary subcluster, your your primary database, you don't want to interfere with ongoing operations, but yet you might want to be hitting your production database with queries, and you want to do so in isolation. So let's imagine that you're developing a new version of your application. It's not changing the data, it's only reading the data. So therefore you can run it against your production database, spin up a subcluster and be able to operate your dev and QA against a subcluster without interfering with your production loads.
Very good, cool. So we have, and it's great to see that people are staying on, so obviously they want to be part of this Q&A. So feel free to share more questions. In my little tag cloud, Amy, I got one for you, maybe just a little shout out. Vertica Advisor is something that you've covered pretty extensively with the Customer Advisory Board and what have you. You want to talk a little bit about Vertica Advisor for those customers that aren't aware of it and what the advantages could be for maybe running a scrutinize?
Sure. So we have developed a report that we can send to you once you send in your Vertica scrutinized report. So in a lot of support cases, we tend to look at the same information time and again, right, to check the best practices of running on the environment, or your environment specifically. So when a scrutinized report is collected from support, we then generate a Vertica Advisor report, which is a visual report that basically queries about 50 to 80, runs 50 to 80 queries on the information that we've gathered and provides it in a visual format to say whether or not you're meeting your best practices. It helps the support identify issues a little more quickly. It also helps to determine whether you're utilizing the product to the best it can be used. And we can also provide recommendations on making things a little better in your environment. So you can do one of two things. You can upload it directly to an S3 bucket, which we have instructions on doing, or you can ask a support engineer to generate one. Like once you generate a scrutinized, and just ask, can I have a Vertica Advisor report? And they'll send it directly to you.
That's great, Amy. I know it's a great benefit to many of our customers, all those best practices from working with all those customers to get their get Vertica running optimally and get the most out of their performance and what have you. There was another one that came in, Dave, probably a little bit more on the roadmap around machine learning. I don't know how much you can comment on it, but it's certainly something that I know Bader, kind of the key engineer behind it, is discussed. And that's interest in extending Vertica Pi to other frameworks. There are a lot of them in languages.
Yeah, I don't know any specific plans around that. I see SQL in the mix there. Of course, SQL remains the primary interface for Vertica for running machine learning models, but not the only interface, right? So you can run your models directly through a Python connection. But if you're putting them into production, it probably makes sense to execute them through SQL. And what may make even more sense is to execute them within a stored procedure. So if you can imagine a stored procedure which wraps your machine learning model and does some of the housekeeping that you almost certainly want to do, particularly with regulated markets, as I mentioned earlier, you may want to automatically save off any recommendations coming from the model, along with the metadata. You know, what were all the inputs? What was the version number of the model? Who was the caller? You know, date and timestamp, obvious, and any other metadata which you could save off into another table in Vertica before returning the results back to the caller.
Cool, thanks, Dave. The follow-on was, and you get this. Oh, so does it look like the same to folks using SQL and Python via Vertica Pi then?
I don't know the details on that. I would expect that there would be differences in the way that they're called. You know, obviously there's a syntactical difference, but beyond that, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but the idea there is you get Python users to be able to, maybe they don't want to know SQL, to make it easier for them, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, there's also the kind of mix and match capability, right? So sometimes, like in a Jupyter notebook, you want to mix and match the code. So that's kind of cool as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's cool. Dave, you mentioned stored procedures. I don't know if there's some Vertica users out there that maybe, you know, just joined and we haven't chatted in a few years. They're probably like, what? Vertica is supporting stored procedures? Am I on the right call right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are religious wars over the use of stored procedures, particularly in a data warehouse, particularly in a read-optimized data warehouse, a columnar database such as Vertica. The traditional use of the stored procedure is to manage a transaction, and transactions, by very definition, are not exactly a good thing to do in a columnar database, because while the results, you know, the commit may happen quickly and you get the results of the transaction quickly, behind the scenes, you know, the database has to manage the record, the change, which often involves writing out the files again, because the underlying files are write once, read many times. They need to be rewritten in order to eventually capture those transactions on disk. So not something you generally want to do. However, stored procedures have other uses in a data warehouse, such as data lifecycle management. So managing your partitions and through the lifecycle of your data. And as I mentioned, in context of machine learning, we think that there's a strong role for stored procedures to play in pipeline management and machine learning model execution.
Cool, Dave. Appreciate it. Appreciate answering all these questions. Okay, I think, Dave, maybe one last one, unless other questions are coming in here. Okay, there's something around change data capture capabilities. Could you share with us your opinion on the role that Vertica might play? We get that time and again, Steve. I know you've gotten that one a few times at events. We get these questions.
Yeah, like I know Precisely, for example, has an integration. They can do change data capture as sort of with that partner solution. You know, I'm not sure, Dave, if it's inherently built into Vertica, but I know that, you know, there are partner solutions that can do CDC.
Yeah, you know, this is a blind spot for me, Steve, so I'm going to have to rely on you and your knowledge of it.
Yeah, we'll follow up on that. I'm pretty sure there are some third-party partner solutions we can refer you to for CDC.
Very good. Okay, cool. We have time for one more. Dave, one of the point you're bringing is, many of our customers use enterprise mode. Talk a little bit about the future. Glimpse of, you got enterprise mode and Eon mode, and how you might be able to get the kind of best of both worlds for a future architecture.
Yes, and that was a degree of foreshadowing there, wasn't it? So yes, we still have customers on enterprise mode, and we don't see the demand for locally attached storage going away. What are the use cases? Well, the obvious ones are maybe operating Vertica with a single node at the edge, where you don't want to burden the deployment with an object store. Certainly in development environments, people run Vertica directly on their laptops. Again, you don't want to burden the deployment with an object store. And then for fixed workload applications where there's a very consistent flow of work into and out of the data warehouse. Again, no need to burden the deployment with an object store. You want all of the data local to the nodes, and enterprise mode makes more sense. So what are we doing? We're converging the two. So there are aspects of Eon mode that make a lot of sense, even in enterprise mode. The abstraction layer, which is in enterprise mode, each node is responsible for its segment, and there's a buddy node. If case safety is 1 or higher, there's 1 or more buddy nodes that are responsible for that same underlying data. By creating an abstraction layer that's more like a subscription, but still keeping that data loaded locally, we can do some interesting things with enterprise mode to make it look more like Eon mode. And at some point in the future, more than likely, you would be able to put a subcluster onto a deployment with locally attached storage that looks a lot like enterprise mode. We're calling this future mode converged mode for now. There's no particular name for it like Eon or anything like that. But it's in our best interest to converge modes anyway, so that we have one mode, whether you choose to store your data locally or in communal storage or in a hybrid of the two. Perhaps you want to tier your data and you want to store projections that are more recent or hotter locally to the nodes, and your older data would get stored out on communal storage. And then of course your oldest you can export to a format like Parquet and layer external tables on top of it for your oldest cold storage data. Thanks for the question, Jeff.
No, it's great answers, Dave. And I think that takes us up just about to the top of the hour. It's great to see everyone engaged and joining right to the end. So this is the first of many. Thank you all for joining. This is recorded. We will get the link out to everyone. Please keep in mind, join the Vertica Academy, join us for Vertica Unify. And of course, as Amy mentioned, the big reveal was around our user groups. We want to get out with all of our users, whether you've been using it for some time or you're a new user. You're going to get a lot from these discussions, and we're going to be able to put meetings together so that you can exchange ideas with each other as well. So that's our commitment to the user community. Thank you so much for joining, and I think that about wraps it up. You guys have a great rest of the day, and thanks again.